PR is simple, it just needs to be done well, says public relations consultant Louise Third, MBE. If you want to get noticed, you must make some noise. And it's putting those words into practice that is the thinking behind her book, PR on a Beermat. If you are looking at this on the video rather than just listening on the audio, there it is, and you can see it behind Louise as well. As a director of her own company, Integra Communications Limited, Louise has handled public relations, media communications and crisis management for clients across the healthcare, medtech, hospitality, financial services and enterprise policy sectors, plus the odd celebrity. I don't know whether that means occasional celebrity or just odd celebrity. There we go. A passionate campaigner, she offers pro bono PR help to charities tackling food poverty and providing support to refugees, both of them very, very timely at the moment, obviously. So firstly, welcome, Louise. It's really, really good to have you here.
Well, it's lovely to meet you, Alison, and of course, get to know a little bit more about the Extraordinary Business Book Club. Well done, and just lovely to feel part of your community.
It's a nice place to be, isn't it? We are a lot of good people here, so welcome to us. And first of all, I mean, going on the community thing, tell me about the Beermats. Where do the Beermats come from?
Yes, I'll be honest, it isn't my own concept. I came across the book, The Beermat Entrepreneur, back in 2003, written by Mike Southern and Chris West. They went on to have a column, I remember, in the Institute of Directors magazine, and I rather got hooked on their wonderful approach to the simplicity of life, the simplicity, apparent simplicity of business, the way they put it. And the Beermat essentially tries to convey that if you can't summarize the purpose, the why, the who for, and the what of your business on the back of a Beermat, maybe you're not as focused as you might be. So it's a slightly light-hearted, what would you scribble on the back of a torn up Beermat in a pub when you're suddenly brain dumping with your friends? I've got a great business idea. So that's where the Beermat concept comes from. So it's very much Mike and Chris's baby, but I got to know them. I introduced myself, as you do, at a conference, and I said, any chance we might work together in some shape or form? So all credit to Mike and Chris. And Chris West, by the way, is himself an author of fiction. And
I didn't know that.
Those of you who want to look Chris up, actually, might be worth having a look at what he does write. And he often tours the literary festivals. So it's been a delight to work with them both.
Fantastic. And it's such a great example of, I don't know if it's a metaphor exactly, but that concept of the Beermat, it's so concrete and so familiar. That's what makes, and also unexpected. And it's such a great example of how that can really capture the imagination.
It's a story, it's a metaphor, but it's also a story which people get straight away. And when I describe how you might sit in a pub and do this, people get it straight away. So yes, it applies just as much to business. Indeed, there are other Beermat books. There's finance on a Beermat, marketing on a Beermat, sales on a Beermat. But it was back in 2007 that I didn't take much persuading, really. But Mike and Chris said, yes, Louise, you can write PR on a Beermat. But that was in the days of ebooks, very much, the beginning of the ebook. But more of that. I just really enjoyed.
We will get onto the publishing. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Hold that thought. Let's stick with the Beermat just for a second, because what's interesting is I think often when we see a book that has got a really good concept like that, often our reaction is, damn, I wish I thought of that idea. But your reaction was, oh, that's a great idea. I wonder how I can extend that. And it must have taken actually quite a lot of guts to go and introduce yourself and say, oh, I really want your idea, like your idea. Can I pick it up and run with it, basically?
Yes. Those who know me will know that I have a feisty attitude to life. And I guess that's what's kept me going through my business career. I've always been self-employed, actually. So I just do it. I just go and ask. You can always ask and people can always say no. But
literally nothing to lose, right?
I think also it helped that we enjoy each other's company and we appreciate each other's skills and what we bring to Beermat. And I believe, I've helped them a little bit of advice on the PR for some of their work. So it has been a two-way flow. I think all three of us have benefited from that relationship.
So, I mean, I've got to ask, if you're going to put PR in a Beermat, and I know it's actually a book, not a Beermat, but what is the sort of guiding principle? Because it's a short book. What did you want to really get across
Yeah.
about
Yes.
PR?
Yeah, there's one diagram in the book which I want everyone to print
The Venn
out, copy
diagram.
out, whatever. And it's a simple three-circle Venn diagram. And it's the best summary. It's the foundation of many of my workshops and training because it's around planning. Yes, if you can see that. One circle is, well, what are your messages? What are you trying to get across? Let's clarify those first of all. The second is, well, who are your audiences? Who do you want to get to? Who are you really trying to target? And of course, you can imagine for different businesses, they're all different. So it's not just about sales. And the third circle, of course, is the media. How are you going to get that message out there? So by the time you overlap all three, guess what? You get an area in the middle that is the perfect ideal campaign, PR campaign, because what you've done is you've aligned all three key components of PR into one. Now, I've just summarized a profession globally in a simple Venn diagram, and you think, oh, that's a bit too simple. Of course, it's complex in many, many ways. And it's the application of PR that becomes quite complicated. But that diagram is essentially the Beermat.
The
Very
Beermat
few
version.
words. Let's put a diagram on the back of a Beermat and take it from there.
It's amazing. Once you have a diagram in your head, it allows you to process the more complex information much more easily, doesn't it? Because you've got a framework within which to contain it. You understand how the bits fit together.
Yes, you have. And I'm also very conscious that we're talking about books here and the written word. And I come across a lot of entrepreneurs and business folk who are actually dyslexic and who struggle to capture a lot of words and process them. So I often use diagrams. I often use color. If I have to use a PowerPoint slide, it's always visual because I have come across folk who said, anyway, Louise, is there any way, for instance, you could put your book into an audio book for me? Because it's the best way I'll understand you.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the visual thing, I think you don't have to be dyslexic. I mean, we are just visual people, aren't we? That's how we're designed. We absorb information visually so much faster than we do reading. So I think it makes all kinds of sense to layer on the access to give people different ways into the message.
And that's why I think so much good PR is based around storytelling and having the spoken word into a piece of press work or into an article, because otherwise it's dry and one dimensional. Once you start to introduce examples of the so what and this is how I did it, that's why all of us should be adept at capturing a concept in, well, tell me how it works in practice. And the answer to that is, oh yeah, I'll tell you about the guy who did
Give me
this.
a human. Give me a human I can pin this on and I
Yeah,
care about. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And that's precisely why I opened the book with a story.
Mm. And you've got so many different entrepreneurs sort of woven all the way through it with their stories as well to illustrate the points, which is really powerful. Let's talk about books in PR. What you've written a book. Is there a PR function for a business book?
There certainly is, because I chose to write this because my own plan to promote myself is around using the book to be able to attract more training opportunities, workshop opportunities, speaking opportunities, raising my own profile. So by writing the book, I've put into practice what I've been telling so many of my clients. There are PR is not just about media coverage. There are so many different facets, and of course, I cover that in the book. So there is a function for the PR for the book in anybody's business. If you're a business owner, you have a unique story to tell. So therefore, if you want to capture it between the pages, That's a wonderful way to do it, but don't expect to make a lot of money from it. It is very much part of your marketing collateral, your PR collateral. Go in with that approach and you won't feel so stressed about it. You'll enjoy the process because you'll see it as part of a much bigger picture.
And the return isn't particularly on the sales that you get from the book. Actually, it's, you give the book away to get the return on the investment in the business, right?
Well, I'm not giving my book away because there's a very good underpinning reason for the sales of the book, which I'd love to cover now, I think. And that is that I do quite a lot of work. As you said before, I'm a campaigner. I do some work in Uganda for a Christian charity called the Teso Development Trust. And they're a development and relief charity in northeast Uganda, which is an impoverished farming, self-sufficient part. And I wanted to use the book to give £1 of every sale to sink a freshwater borehole in northeast Uganda in a village that I know well. So you can see how I feel there's lots of layers of reasons why I've written my book and why others do the same. And I've noticed this in some of my colleagues who've written books. They've done it for other reasons as well. They want to raise money for a charity, they want to campaign for a cause. A friend of mine's just written a book on sort of rugby aimed at sort of 11 to 15-year-olds, which tackles bullying. So, and it's a fictional book, but yes, you can see how I think people might go, oh, actually, yeah, maybe there's another reason for me to do that. So I'm truly hoping that I sell 5,000 copies of the book because it's £5,000 to sink a freshwater borehole.
Perfect. You're right. Layering on those reasons to write is really powerful, isn't it? Love
Yes.
that. The writing of the book, was it harder than you expected? Easier than you expected? What surprised you about it?
I started thinking that I'd just be able to expand the ebook from 2007. But when I reread it, I realized it was horribly out of date. Because if you remember, 2007-8 was just the beginning of social media takeoff. So you've got Twitter, I think we had LinkedIn, but all of a sudden, there was a whole new area of what we call owned and shared PR possible through social media. Also, I looked at the entrepreneurs that I used in that book, and I mean, sadly, one had died, what one had gone abroad, and I thought, no, Louise, you're going to have to start from scratch. Don't try to build on and bolt on something that's old and tired and worn. And because I started to do that and it was stressful, I
Yeah.
found myself getting concerned that actually it just wasn't going to work. And I took myself back to first principles again myself and thinking, we're now in 2019, 2020. What's the world like now? What do my readers need now? And it just created a whole new book. And I felt less stressed about that.
It's
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it? Because it feels like it should be easier to start from something and rework it. But if it's old, if it's not fit for purpose, you're better just to kind of accept the learning from it and start again.
Yes. Yes. I'd like to think that over, having had 30 to 35 years in business and certainly 25 in public relations, that I'm still learning. And I'm a member of a professional body that encourages us to do that. And therefore, I wanted to learn more myself, or remind myself and reflect on what I should know as a professional, but what more do I need to know as I wrote the book. So there's an interesting process of my own relearning, reaffirming, reestablishing that the right kind of content. But you've seen, having seen the book, I did actually enlist the support of two young digital marketing, digital PR experts.
Yeah, tell us
In
about
their
it's Hallam
Yes,
Agency. Yes,
mm, I did. I could understand that those in their 20s who are handling digital PR all the time would be very valuable. One, to write some content for me, but to sort of pressure check my own thinking around digital marketing. So there is a whole chapter on being sort of digitally savvy. It doesn't pretend to tell you everything, but it just raises the awareness of the reader that they perhaps should be really taking quite seriously how they come across and how they use a whole new raft of online digital tools.
It really struck me actually that the book is very collaboratively written. I mean, it's very much your book, but you've taken that concept and run with it with the blessing of Mike and Chris, and you've used the Hallam agency, and you've got people involved, and you've got your entrepreneurs whose stories you're using. Was that a kind of natural extension of who you are and how you work, or was it a conscious decision in terms of how to help you write the book?
It is actually reflective of my company values. My view is that I'm a tiny cog in a big wheel, and others play a big part in what we're doing in business generally, and certainly in public relations. And so I like to see that one of my vision is to contribute to a thriving economy. Now, if you take that word contribute, that implies straight away that I'm just a partner with many into a thriving economy. And then I just want to see my clients thrive as well. So, through the use of PR and then applying wisdom to that. And then you cannot go into PR without building relationships. You have relationship with your client, and we all have relationships with suppliers and customers and so on. But I have a very, very, very important relationship with journalists. And within the book as well, I draw on four journalists, one from the Times, one from the Express, one from the Daily Mail, and one from the Nottingham Post. So to look at sort of local. And I also draw from a former ITV presenter journalist to talk about crisis interviews, crisis handling, and a videographer. So the book is a conversation between myself and those other experts on paper to the readers. And that is the way I wanted to write it. As you and I are chatting now, I wanted to write it so that it is that many multiple voices, as if you gathered them in a training room, and your audience are the small business owner managers who this book is aimed at, the freelancer, the small business owner, the entrepreneur, and even the business advisor. You're sitting in a room with me and my chums, and we are just chatting about what works well, what could go wrong, and what does go wrong. And it's all about gathering as many nuggets as I could into about 140, 150 pages.
And I mean, it may just be the way you naturally work, but actually, there's some really interesting sort of reasons why that's a really good idea. Not least because it's great for keeping you going. When your other people are involved in this project, it's harder for you to sort of just lose the energy of sitting in a room on your own. It keeps the spark alive, doesn't it? When you're kind of sparking off other people as well.
Yeah. Well, in terms of process, that is a very good reminder that actually we had regular phone-ins on Zoom. I did write this during lockdown, so this is my lockdown baby, which meant that all my meetings and conversations were on Zoom or Teams. And we had a shared document on Google Drive, hosted, Hallam looked after it. And I found that the Tom and Becca, who joined with me, we just had regular meetings scheduled into the diary, which said, "How are you doing? Check in. How's it going? How does the latest iteration of that chapter looks like? This chapter look like?" And that certainly kept me going. As you say, working on your own can be a bit lonely. So use the opportunity to use online meetings as often as you can.
Yeah, brilliant. And collaborative documents and workspaces. Yeah. Let's talk
Yes.
about the publishing, Louise, because you decided, well, tell me about it. What did you decide and how did you go about it?
Yeah, I know that the Beermat books that Mike and Chris have published have variously been published by Pearson and by others. I wasn't wanting to be honest, I hadn't got a massive budget to be able to pay a publisher on top of everything else. So I just decided to investigate the Amazon route, the self-publishing route, and I spoke to quite a few people who've gone that route, and I decided that that would be the way I would go, and it has been brilliant. I've really, really enjoyed it. I have never ever spoken to anyone at Amazon. You speak to the algorithm. They have an amazing robot or whatever Amazon uses to allow you to um, upload your document, check it, double check it. I all credit to them. They've created a platform which obviously enables anyone who wants to to publish, which may or may not be a great thing, but certainly from where I sat, I thought, let's be sensible about this. I don't think a publisher is necessarily going to take this on board. I don't know why. Maybe it's that little voice on my shoulder saying you're not worthy. But I decided to go Amazon. I therefore realized that the actual returns to me would be fewer because Amazon do take 60% of the sales price, which is still fine because I knew that each book I'd probably have £5 and then I'd be able to give £1 to the Uganda work. And I'm happy with that. Absolutely happy with that. It's also been easy for people to buy the book and for me to monitor sales as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
I have found it a good route.
yeah, they have done a huge amount of work on those reporting algorithms, and the control that you have as an author is it's really interesting. Yeah, it's a whole new world, isn't it?
Yes.
So I always ask guests, Louise, for their top tip. And I know you weren't a first time writer exactly because you've done your ebook, but if you imagine yourself as a nervous first time business book writer, what would your best advice be?
It has to be something we've covered already, to be quite honest. It's know your reader, know the target audience that you're writing for. There's no doubt about that.
PR and books, right?
Yeah, yeah. The two are well. It's all about communications. So the
Absolutely.
perfect communication is that overlap. Well, I'm back to Venn diagrams here. Overlaps, and imagine two circles this time. One is what you'd like to say, what you really want to say. And when I do speech writing as well as and speaker coaching as well as PR. So you often have people go, this is what I really feel I want to say and I've got to say and I will say. That's their circle. The other circle is the audience, the recipients of that. And what do they need? What are they expecting? What's there on their agenda? Now, if those two circles don't overlap, you can imagine what happens. You've got a total disconnect. And of course, we go to conferences, don't we, where we see that disconnect. The speaker is standing there and going, what? Well, the audience are all going, well, I'm in the wrong room. This person really hasn't thought about me. Overlap those two circles, and the bit in the middle is called playing to the overlap. And that's what we use in speech writing and in speaker coaching. So you can imagine it's exactly the same for your book. Play to the overlap. So it makes you think every word has got to work. Every chapter, the structure, drive the reader through from start to finish so that actually you achieve your aim by the end of the book and they also have achieved what they wanted from picking up the book. So remember that, playing to the overlap. Does that help, Alison?
I think it's a great tip. And it's one of those things you think when you're writing a book, it feels like a monologue. It's not, it's a dialogue. Because when the reader's reading it, they're going to be co-creating it. The reading experience is a creative piece where you bring everything as a reader. I think quite often, writers forget that because the reader isn't in the room with them at the time.
Yes.
So, yeah, no, great tip. Brilliant. And I also always ask people to recommend a business book. So, Louise, what would you recommend that people listening to the podcast should read?
Yeah. It's a book I've bought recently, actually, and it follows on quite nicely from what we've just been talking about. And it's by Paul Smith, and I'm going to hold it up now, but it's the 10 stories great leaders tell by Paul Smith. Because I love the book because it is, like my own, chunked into sections that you can open and use quite quickly. Leaders are busy people. They haven't got time to plow through 300, 400, 500 words of a heavy business school tone book. They simply need something quick to get their head into because they're bright. So business leaders are bright. They just need a reminder. But it's also a reminder that the only way to persuade your staff, your suppliers or whoever, to persuade them to do something is through a story. And that's how persuasive dialogue runs. It's you can tell me the facts, but actually speak to my heart, emotion, emotion leads to action. Well,
Yeah.
as we can see that sometimes speeches are in the wrong hands and you can get the wrong kind of reaction. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's the one. It's Paul Smith's book, and it's I found it very, very helpful when I've been working with clients.
Fantastic. I've seen it, but I haven't read it. So that's a great recommendation. Thank you. I shall scurry away and find it for myself. Brilliant. And Louise, if people want to find more about you, more about Beermat PR, where should they go?
Well, certainly for the book, first of all, just search Amazon PR and a beer mat, and it'll pop straight up. You can't miss it because the green cover is quite dramatic. Thank you if you do buy a copy, because £1 of your sale will go towards the Uganda borehole, and which will be called the Beermat borehole, which I'm not quite sure whether that's appropriate, but anyway. And then also pop a comment, quote, testimonial, if you would, on there. For myself, well, link with me on LinkedIn. Tend to use that a lot as at Louise Third, and the same with Twitter, at Louise Third. If you wanted to see more of my background and my philosophy and where I come from, my website is louisethird.com.
Brilliant. I'll put all those links up on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Louise. Thank you so much. And I kind of knew intellectually that PR and book writing had a lot in common, but we've really, really drawn that out today, and it's been really fascinating. Thank you.
Well, I would encourage your listeners and the community to have a go at using perhaps the written word, a book, a story, your story, into your public relations and your publicity, because it'll make a massive difference.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.